logo. And even though Career Day was a couple of days ago, we're keeping momentum going here by covering interview skills. So hopefully all of you had a fabulous Career Day and really enjoyed speaking with the employers. And hopefully, of course, some of those conversations will turn into interviews. So let's just dive straight into it. Before I do, I would like to acknowledge that here at KPU, we work, study, and live in a region south of the Fraser River, which overlaps with the unceded traditional and ancestral lands of the Kwantlen, Musqueam, Katsi, Semiahmoo, Tsawwassen, Kikite, and Coquitlam peoples. And another overview here of what you can expect from your Career Center at KPU. I won't go over each of these services, but please do check us out at kpu.ca/career center to find out all the resources and services that are available to you. Here's what we'll be covering together this afternoon. The purpose of interviews, what to do before and during, and of course after interviews, both virtual and in person. We'll review a few common and behavioral style questions, and I do have a couple of examples of each one. What to do in the follow-up process. We're going to wrap it up, have some questions, and then of course, please do stick around for the $20 Tim Hortons gift card draw. So the purpose of an interview, whenever you go into a meeting, go into an interview, any question that they ask you, it is to answer one or more of the following. The first one is motivation. Are you interested in working there for that company with those employees? Do you want to be there, right? Do you want the job? The next one, of course, is to establish whether or not you have the skills, both the hard skills, so job-specific skills, and the soft skills. So those are the skills that demonstrate for the employer the type of employee, type of colleague you will be. And then finally, are you the right fit? Right? So do you share the values, the same values that the other employees and that the company itself shares? Now, remember, though, the purpose of an interview is also for you to determine all of these things for yourself. So it does go both ways. It's for you to establish if this is indeed the type of position you want and the type of company you want to be working with and for. Congratulations, you have the job invitation rather. So if they don't voluntarily offer this information, feel free to ask it. Who is going to be interviewing you? So make sure that you get a list of their names spelled correctly and the positions as well. Make sure to check out the logistics of the interview. Will it be online? Will it be in person? If so, which location, if they have multiple locations? Is there parking there? Do you check in with reception, right? And is there anything in particular to prepare? Now, chances are if there was something for you to prepare, they would tell you that. But by asking that question, it might prompt them to give you a little bit more information in terms of what you can expect when you get there, right? They might say to you, well, we're not looking for you to prepare anything per se, but we will be asking you to hop on this machine and you know, kind of show us what you got. Or they might say to you, well, it's primarily behavioral style questions, so a behavioral based interview. So by asking that question, it might prompt a little bit more information that will help you prepare for the actual interview. Speaking of preparing, let's have a look at what to do before the interview. Now, it might have been a little while since you've been to an in-person meeting, and even if you are having an interview virtually, you do want to make sure that you still fit in and are still comfortable with your interview clothing. So make sure not just the day of, but the day or days before the meeting is set to happen that you've tried on that tried and true interview outfit. It still fits. There's no moth holes in it, and you're still comfortable in it, right? So make sure that you do have the right outfit. ready and prepared to go. For in-person, I do suggest that you avoid any kind of perfume or cologne. Now, we just don't know, right? We're starting to see, or we have seen, a lot of sensitivities around that type of thing. So better err on the side of caution and avoid it altogether. If it's online, now we're all pros now. If it's online, you all know what to do, but I'm still going to tell you. Make sure that you have a professional or at least a very simple background. Avoid having a window behind you so you're not washed out. Make sure you're in a quiet spot with good reception, good Wi-Fi reception, good lighting, and then practice. Turn the camera or turn the video feature on your laptop and practice using that format as well. There are rooms that you can book at KPU if you want to have good reception and a quiet place to have that interview. So make sure to check that out if you're not able to ensure you have that kind of privacy at home. If you're having that meeting in person, then of course, as I mentioned already, make sure that you have the correct location, and then make sure you have gas in your car, your compass card is loaded, change for the meter, right? Make sure you have the app on your phone, whatever it might be. It's these little things that often, sets us back a few minutes. So make sure that those things that you can control, you control those ahead of time, right? And then make sure that you research the company. You want to make sure that you are comfortable enough to answer the why do you want to work here question, or what do you know about the company? Now, listen, if you came to the webinar prior to Career Day on networking, then I spoke there about the importance of research in the company and ways that you can research the company as well. So you might have some really good intel because you took those proactive measures of networking with people that worked within the company before. So you might be way ahead of the game here. You might be way ahead of me here. So ways that you can research, of course, you can start with Google, but please don't finish there. Looking at LinkedIn, annual reports if you really want to delve in deep, and then of course employees. Get some internal intel from some internal employees through perhaps some information meetings. Okay, continuing on, the other thing you want to do, of course, is prepare answers to questions you think they might ask you. How do you do this? Well, you get a deep understanding of the position itself, the skills that are required to be successful in the position, the type of experience they might be looking for, and so forth. So once you've identified those skills that they're looking for in the position, then you want to come up with some examples of times that you demonstrated those particular skills, both soft skills and hard skills. So again, job-specific skills or skills that demonstrate how you're going to be as a colleague or as an employee. So preparing questions to common and behavioral style questions, and I might suggest that when you're doing this, you do it in bullet point. The reason why I say this is because the way that we write is really not the way that we speak, and we might think that we've written it really, really well and it's so eloquently presented, but we're not necessarily able to speak that way because it's not natural for us to do that. So what I would suggest you do is stick with point form so that you get your point across, and not so much how the sentence, the flow of the sentence, but rather the point of what it is you're trying to get across. So use bullet points in order to, when you're writing down questions to common and behavioral style questions in your preparation. The next thing is to practice. Practice with someone. So through your career development center, you can book mock interviews with a career coach. This is the best way to practice. You could practice with a friend, someone that you trust, to give you some good constructive feedback. You can also practice for a virtual interview or not by using the video feature on your laptop. Turn it on and practice looking into the camera and answering those common and behavioral style interview questions. The day of the interview, you've already established where it is. You've filled up your compass card. You've filled up gas, or at least halfway with the prices we're seeing today. But you're ready to go. Logistically, you're ready to go. Arrive there a few minutes early, 5-10 minutes early. You don't want to get there too early. If you do get there much earlier than that, consider staying out in your vehicle, or maybe just having a little walk around, because you don't want them to feel rushed if you walk into the building a little bit too early. If you are running late, okay, let's just say it happens for sure, but call and explain why, and hopefully they are okay to wait for you, but be prepared. They might need to set a new time. Hopefully they'll want to set a new time. Review your notes while you're waiting. So avoid taking your phone out and starting to scroll through your phone. Have a look around. Pay attention to the people that are coming in and out of the building, or in and out of that office space or that workspace. Do they seem happy? What are they? How are they engaging with each other, and so forth? So pay attention to these types of things as well. I would avoid using your phone, and make sure that you did in fact mute it as well. What to bring for the day of the interview? Well, copies of your resume might be really appreciated by those people that are interviewing you, especially if you have a panel. I would suggest that you bring a few copies of your resume for each of the interviewers. They might not have had time to print out a copy, and oftentimes in an interview they will make reference to your resume. List of 3 or 4 references. Now, with your reference sheet, you want to make sure that it's kind of continuing that brand. For those of you that came to the resume and cover letter webinar, I did talk about the importance of keeping the same header for your resume as your cover letter, and also for your reference sheet, just to keep that brand going. So with the same header, you'll then list 3 to 4 references in case the interview goes well and they ask for them then and there. But don't worry about it, of course. You can always just email them afterwards, that list of references. A pen and a pad, definitely, whether it's virtual or in person, a pen and a pad is pretty crucial. Now, on this pad, you might have some prearranged questions that you'd like to ask them, but you might be surprised to find that they often will do a lot of the talking during an interview. And in so doing, they might actually answer those questions you had already planned to ask. So having a pen handy will help you to identify new questions as the meeting is moving forward. Jot down a couple of words just to remind yourself of these new questions. You don't want to sit there and write a book or anything, but quickly jot down 1 or 2 new questions that you can ask. So what to do during the interview? Well, if it's an online interview, you do want to, as much as possible, maintain eye contact. And by doing that, you would simply be staring directly into the camera. And that could take a little bit of practice, because it's very likely you're going to want to have a look at their faces on the screen. But when answering the questions, move your eyes from their face on the screen and look directly into the camera. Even though it's online, that is a great form of engagement. Make sure to have a plan B. So if your connection does get disconnected, you might want to make sure that they do have your most current phone number on hand. So just establish that perhaps early on. If you've noticed that it's getting a little glitchy, let them know. If you do get disconnected, you will be calling them back, or they can call you back at this particular number. So a plan B is a good idea. As I mentioned already, that notepad that you've brought in should also contain, this is again for online, should also contain some keywords, right? Terminology, industry-specific terminology that you want to make sure to insert into those answers that you're given. And plus, they might also prompt some examples, things that remind you of certain skills, or times rather that you use certain skills. And having these keywords jotted down on your in your notepad might help to prompt those very important memories. Of course, you'll also want to have a copy of a resume on hand. Chances are they have a copy of your resume from their end as well, but it is a good idea to have one on hand, because, as I said earlier, it's very likely they're going to make reference to your resume. So it's a good idea to have a copy of that resume in front of you as well. What's your resting face like? Again, if you have a panel asking you questions, you might do a lot of listening and not necessarily a ton of talking. And so what does your resting face look like? Make sure that you are mirroring the people that are interviewing you. So you want to show engagement and interest, and you always want to try to maintain, a bit of a friendly face, a bit of a friendly smile. So be aware of that as well. Dress like you are in person, even though it is online. You want to make yourself believe that you are the right fit for this role. And part of doing that will be dressing the part. So, leave the fluffy slippers for movie night and stick with a professional presentation head to toe. The in-person interview. And of course, we're going to start seeing that more and more, I would think. So we used to say, make sure you give a nice firm handshake, but I suspect people might not be ready for that yet. So perhaps an elbow bump or a fist bump is something that they might prefer. Make sure to smile, right? Your impression is made within the first few seconds of that meeting. So make sure to walk in with a smile, with genuine interest, and be ready to go. Just like your virtual, a notepad and a pen is very handy, especially for the panel where you might want to jot down the names of each of the panelists. And as I mentioned before, if they happen to answer those questions that you had previously arranged for yourself, you have the opportunity to now jot down some new keywords or new reminder words for you to ask those new questions. Body language. Now, I do want to make reference to the fact that body language and eye contact is very culturally specific here. So I will be speaking more from kind of a Western perspective when it comes to this. For the most part, we do want to maintain a certain level of eye contact. It does portray confidence and truth in what it is you are speaking. Your body language should also reflect more or less the body language of the people that are interviewing you, and perhaps take it up a step, right? So if they are a little bit more on the casual side and they're kind of leaning back in their chair, that's a suggestion for you to also kind of relax a little bit. So maybe just relax, but still take it up a little bit more, one step formal. Make sure that you're really feeding off that person. So I mentioned before, it's very likely they're going to be doing a lot of the talking, explaining the position, explaining the team, the company, how great they are, what they do. While they're doing this, make sure that you're leaning in and your head might be tilted slightly. You'll be nodding in agreement with what it is they have to say, and really kind of encouraging them to continue on to explain or talk more about the company. Use of hands while talking, again, going back, it's definitely a cultural thing. We see it more in some cultures more so than others, but it is a form of physical engagement. So feel free to use your hands while you're having a conversation with them. But at the same time, you still want to make sure that you are doing it in a way that is authentic and comfortable for you. And then again, mirroring the interviewer, just pay attention to their body language, and that will oftentimes let you know if you've been talking too long, or perhaps if you haven't fully answered the question, right? They might do a little bit of a squint, they might kind of lean in, and in that part, at that point, you might ask them, was this what you were looking for, or would you like me to continue, right? And that'll kind of prompt you, their body language will prompt you to continue on or to wrap it up. And then, of course, we finish by asking them about next steps. Okay, so what are the next steps? Will there be a second interview? When are you hoping to make a decision by? Those are questions that you ask at the end of the interview, of course. Let's have a look at answering the questions. These are some pretty common interview questions, right? Tell me about yourself. What is your greatest strength? What is your greatest weakness? What kind of compensation or salary are you seeking? So tell me about yourself. Very common to open up an interview this way. And while it is meant to build rapport, it is an interview question. So it is important that you answer this question in its entirety, right? So generally speaking, what they want to know here is a little bit about your work experience, a little bit about your academic experience, including some interesting projects that you might have worked on and so forth. But they also want to know about you. They also want to know about you as a person outside of these, outside of work and outside of school. So don't be afraid to tell them a little bit about you, what you enjoy doing. If you can connect it back to why you are drawn to this particular company, fabulous. But don't feel the need to do this. But the tell me about yourself question is very much that. They want to know about you. What is your greatest strength? Are you confident enough to tell them what your greatest strength is and to demonstrate what that is? What is your greatest weakness? Okay, is it something that's going to be detrimental to the position? If it is, you might want to avoid telling them about that particular weakness. Or if you choose to tell them about that, you might want to tell them how you're working on that particular weakness. And in fact, it's turning into a bit of a strength. Okay. And then what kind of compensation or salary are you seeking? This is not the time to negotiate. This is an interview question, and they want to make sure that you're on the same page here. The best way to answer this type of question is you have already done your research, you've identified fair market value, and you might give them a range that you're comfortable with, right? You don't have to give them the exact market value range, the range that you're comfortable with. And then you could ask them this question. Is this what you had in mind for this role? Right? You can also, of course, state that while this is the range that you would be comfortable with, you understand that salary is way more than just money, and that would be something that you would love to talk about maybe a little further in the process. Let's have a look at your greatest weakness in action. Okay, so here we have this interviewer asking this candidate here, what is their greatest weakness? So here's an example of that. I'd say my greatest challenge is that I pay too much attention to details when working on a project. To keep me focused on the big picture and to ensure I move forward with the project, I started using this really great app, great project management app called Swift that prompts me at certain points in my timeline while reminding me of the purpose of the project. This has really helped me with school research projects and even some personal projects. Okay, so great self-awareness here. This candidate has identified, again, self-awareness by stating what their challenge is. Notice I switched that word from weakness to challenge. And then they also told them how they're working on that. Don't start looking for this app called Swift. I made this up. So I'm sure there are plenty of apps that do this, but not one that's called Swift. Let's hop over to behavioral style questions here. So behavioral style questions are extremely important for employers, and if you've experienced an interview yet in your lifetime, it's very likely you've been asked multiple behavioral style questions. The concept here is that it's a pretty good indicator for the employer to get an idea for how you might be in certain situations with that company based on how you were in similar situations previously, either in previous work, while at school, or even in your personal life. Okay, so it's used to evaluate candidates' experiences and behaviors as they pertain to the role. Again, this is your time to shine. Identify the top skills that you would be using in this new position. Also identify some challenges that you think you might face or that employees might often face in this kind of role, and make sure that you come up with some behavioral style responses that show that you would be strong, you have the strong skill set in order to overcome those potential challenges. Here's a few examples of some behavioral style questions. And again, if you've been asked a behavioral style question in the past, it's very likely it's been one of these. Have you ever had a conflict with a coworker, supervisor, or customer? Now, if you have 5+ years working experience, even less than that, in customer service or just generally, chances are the answer is yes here. But you'll notice that this is indeed a close-ended question. Have you ever? You could simply respond with yes, I have, or no, I haven't. But it's a trick question, right? You need to reply with a specific example of when you have. If you have some work experience, it's very likely that you have had some kind of conflict with a coworker. Another thing I want you to focus on is the question, conflict. That word can mean war for some people, and it's a heavy word. So feel free when you're replying to clarify. Say, well, I don't know if I would categorize this as a conflict, but certainly a disagreement. There was a time when, and then you could go into your answer then. Tell me about a time that you had to work under pressure. Tell me about a time that you had to work under pressure. So they're really prompting you here by saying, tell me about a time when, right? What is one of your greatest achievements? And I'm going to give you a scenario and I'd like you to tell me what you would do. So pretty common behavioral style questions. Let's break this down. In order to answer a behavioral style question, the most effective technique to use is the STAR technique, and it's really you telling stories. It's engaging storytelling to ensure that you answer the question in its entirety while adhering to an easy to follow structure. And that's the STAR technique. Let's break this down a little bit. So STAR stands for, it is an acronym, it stands for the situation. So in that case, you would briefly describe the situation, the who, what, where, when. Right? At this point, you're pulling them into your story. Remember earlier when we talked about body language? Well, we want to see their body language shift. As soon as you start telling the story, I want to see them lean in. I want to see them engaged in that story, right? So build the scene for your listener, right? When I first started working at ABC Corporation, right? You're telling a story, I'm leaning in. I'm going to start to listen to you here. The T stands for task. So explain the task that you were working on or the particular challenge that you were facing. It could have been something that a team was facing. You and your team were facing this. But the action piece, so that's the A, the action piece, it really should be specific to the actions that you took, not the team. So you can be describing a time when your team faced these issues, but the listener now wants to know about the actions that you took in order to alleviate this situation, right? So this is your time to shine, actions that you took, so skills that you use to alleviate the challenge or the conflict, to reduce the task time, to decrease cost, to increase customers, etc. Right? So again, identify the skills, spell out for the listener the skills that you used in order to improve this situation. And then the results. Now, they don't always necessarily end on a positive note, but hopefully, and in many cases they do. But if it didn't end on a positive note, and if the action really was you shining, if you were demonstrating all these really fantastic skills and traits, but it didn't end on a positive note, don't brush that example to the side. Use it, but then consider talking about the result and reflecting back on what you learned during the process, right? That A piece is really the opportunity for you to shine. But anytime we're dealing with any kind of human interaction, anything can happen, right? So the result isn't necessarily something we had hoped for, but if that's the case, just make sure to change that R to reflection, what you learned about the process, how you might have approached it differently, and so forth. This slide might look familiar to those of you that came to the resume and cover letter webinar a couple weeks back or last week. I don't remember when it was. So here on this slide here, I spoke about the importance of including accomplishment sentences on your resume to replace tasks, right? So not simply telling them what it was you were paid to do, but rather how you approach that particular job, right? So turning them from tasks I watched children at a summer camp, or I worked with a team of other campers, or I tutored children in chemistry, to an accomplishment sentence. Developed engaging curriculum for in-house science fair, which has become a staple itinerary item for camps that exceed 1 week in length. We're going to take this accomplishment sentence and we're going to turn it into a star response, right? So, question here might be, what is one of your greatest achievements? Well, going back to this is a pretty good achievement. Why don't you tell them about this one and how you did that? So star in action. So what is one of your greatest achievements? During my second summer as a camp leader for the YMCA, I began entertaining campers on rainy days with small science experiments like the baking soda volcano, the egg drop, and one time I even built a solar oven. These activities were really well received, so I approached the director about incorporating a mini science fair into camps that exceeded a week. They really liked the idea but couldn't promise me much funding for it. I told them that I would find the money if they gave me the space, and they agreed. I reached out to an educational supplies store and they agreed to provide limited supplies for 5 consecutive summers. From there, I drafted a lesson plan that all camp leaders could follow that included instructions and experiment ideas. This coming summer will be the 3rd annual YMCA Mini Science Fair, as indicated in all of their promotional material. They recently told me that enrollment is up by over 10% since adding that activity, and I'm pretty proud of that. So a disclaimer here, this is not true. Again, this is not true. So don't go looking for YMCA camps that have a science fair element to it. And I just thought that I would include a solar oven. That's an image of a solar oven there. Why not? It's kind of cool. So there we have it in action, a star in action. One thing I want you to think about, as I was reading this, you were probably thinking like, I don't know if I have anything that would really be a great star response. I can guarantee you that you do. And what I might suggest you do, and I'm just giving this as an example, but you can certainly use your own method. Here I put together a table, something that you might want to keep on your desktop. And every time you do think of something or you do experience an accomplishment, something that you're proud of, or a time that you alleviated, conflict or whatever it might be, add it to your table. So here I have the acronym WVPE. It's not really much one, but work, volunteer, personal and education, a brief description, and then break it down. The situation, the task, the action, and those 2 R's, result and reflection, right? Because every setback, every challenge and success is a future star story, right? I want you to start changing the way that you approach dilemmas or conflicts or any concerns that you might have. And I want you to ask yourself, how do I want to tell a future employer how I handled this situation? Okay, how do you want to tell them you handled this situation now? And then take those steps so that you have a really great star story to tell in the future. Here's an example of a table that you can use. Keep it on your desktop and keep adding to it. Okay, and you'll just keep adding more and more lines to it, because as you go through KPU, and for those of you that have graduated and are now moving into the world of work, you will be really filling up this table in no time. But you need to kind of be on top of it and keep reminding yourself that a lot of these stories, a lot of these conflicts or challenges or successes, they can all be turned into a star story. So I do encourage you to give it some thought. Think about a time that you accomplished something. It can be a school-based accomplishment, work-based, financial, like a personal accomplishment, and using the STAR method, using something like this, write it down and then say it out loud. Right? Practice saying it out loud so it just kind of slides off your tongue and you're really, really comfortable talking about yourself in that way. Okay, so we are moving to the end of the interview itself. They will ask you this. Do you have any questions for us? I really hope the answer to this will be yes, because you have your pad and your pen, right? And even though they might have answered questions that you came in with, you have since developed new questions that you want to ask them. So things that you might want to think about is the JOIN acronym. Ask them questions about the job, about the organization, about the interviewer and their own experiences with the company, and next steps. Don't forget about those next step questions, right? So prepare about 4 or 5 ahead of time. And then, of course, like I said, you have your pad and your pen to write some new ones. Is this a newly developed position? Right, that lets you know, is there economic growth? Is this company growing? Is that why they have this opening? Or did somebody leave the position? And if so, why? Can you tell me a little bit about the team that I would be working with? Right, and then don't forget to ask about follow-up. Will there be a second interview? When are you hoping to make a decision by? And can I contact you by this date if I don't hear from you before then? Okay, so here's your time to analyze. Remember back to the beginning of our webinar here, I did talk about the importance of you identifying, is this the right fit for you as well? It's not just for the employer to determine if you're the right fit for them, but it's also your time to determine if they are the right fit for you. So analyze how it went. How did you feel? You can start, of course, by reviewing the way you answered the questions, but also identify how you felt during it. Right? Were there any red flags? Do you find that you're even more excited about the prospect of joining this company? Make sure to write down some notes for yourself. What was your overall impression? Are there some areas that you can improve in the way you yourself interviewed? What were the strong points? Did you ask about next steps? And make sure that you follow up. Following up with a thank you note, right? Within 2 to 24 hours, I would say would be appropriate. If it was a panel, I would suggest that you send a brief, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, a brief thank you note to each of the panelists, something a little bit different for each of them as well. You do want to make a specific reference to something that was said during the interview so that they know that you were engaged and interested and listening. Feel free to just do it by email. Depending on the type of company, if it's a small kind of ma and pa type place, maybe a handwritten note, but for the most part, email is fine. Thank them for the meeting, reiterate your interest. Again, make reference to something that was that they specifically mentioned or pointed out to you during the interview, and then let them know that you're looking forward to, this particular date to hear back from them. One thing to consider is that about 80% of HR managers consider thank you emails helpful for reaching the final hiring decision. Now, it's not necessarily going to get you the job, but listen, if it's between you and another candidate and you send the thank you follow-up and the other candidate doesn't, well, it's pretty likely that that might push the positive in your direction. So keep that in mind. From that same survey, actually, only 24% of candidates reported sending a thank you note. So please be part of the 24%. A few final thoughts that I want to leave you with here. You have the interview because they liked your application process, right? Or perhaps you had already networked with them ahead of time and already kind of made a case for yourself there. But they're not going to interview you if they're not interested in you as a prospective employee. Right? That's really important to remember. They're bringing you in because they are genuinely interested in your application, and now they need to know you a little bit more. And they want to know those 3 things. Do you want the job with that company? Do you have the skills, the hard skills and the soft skills that they're looking for? And are you the right fit? Right? Those are the 3 things that they're looking for. So any of those questions that they ask you, it's to help them identify one or more of those things. Remember, it's also an opportunity for you to determine if this is the right match for you. So please be yourself, quirkiness and all, be yourself. right? Super important. Practice. So practice by saying your answers out loud, practice by recording yourself, and practice by perhaps booking a mock interview with a KPU career coach. Don't forget to follow up by sending a thank you note or an email. That'll really help you stand out in the crowd. And if you haven't heard back by the date that they told you you should hear back by, follow up, right? Make sure to follow up. If this isn't the role that you get, but it is a company that you're interested in pursuing again in the future, the way you go through this entire process will really set a tone, right, for any future prospects as well. So make sure to always follow up, show that you're proactive, engaged, and interested in this company if you are. Right? All right, and then I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and see if anyone has any questions. Okay, so Michelle, I'll just maybe hand it over to you, see if we have any questions.
For sure. Oh, let me just. Hello?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I do have two questions here. One from Natasha. Could you show that slide with the resume again? Again, I think the student just wants to see your resume slide again, Chantal, if that will be fine.
Yeah, I can absolutely do that.
Yeah, one thing to note, students, we are recording this session, and so if you do want to go back and kind of like look at and want to take screenshots of the slides that Chantal had presented today, you'll definitely be able to do that. We'll try our best to get the recording available early next week by Monday or Tuesday. And the recording will be in this site. Go.
So here's the slide again. And this slide is from the resume and cover letter webinar as well. So you can have a look at that. If you weren't able to attend that webinar, you can certainly have a look at that because we have recorded that. But this is the slide from that one, and I use it as an example for how to really kind of move away from just simply listing tasks on a resume to focusing much more on accomplishment sentences, right?
Chantal, just to let you know, I think the slide that you're showing right now is like a question mark slide.
Oh.
I'm not seeing the resume, my dear.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because that's the one I'm seeing. Let me try that again.
For sure. For sure. And I know there's somebody who has their hands up. We'll get to you in a minute, okay?
Can you see that slide? Is that the resume slide?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yes. So again, this is the slide from the resume and cover letter webinar from a couple weeks back, and yeah. So hopefully you'll find that useful.
Okay, perfect. Natasha, again, should you send a thank you note to anyone you spoke with at the career day? Really great question.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And like I said, it doesn't have to be anything long and fancy. An email is sufficient. And I would suggest if you say you happen to speak to a couple of representatives from the same company, please take the time to send each of those representatives an email. And in that email, be specific with something that kind of stood out for you during that meeting, right? So thank them for their time, reiterate your interest, and reference something specific from that meeting, because that will also help them remember you.
That's a great tip, Chantal. For the next question from Simran Preet, the reference that you talked about, should they be personal, professional, or academic?
Such good questions here, Michelle. Yeah. So there is a bit of a hierarchy when it comes to references, right? Now, if you are a student and your experience is only from being a student, then that would be perhaps who you would need to call on. Professors or instructors that really are aware of your working style, your working habits, and so forth, that can speak confidently to that. Ideally, if you do have work experience, that would be the first reference you would put, would be your direct supervisor. So ideally, your reference is someone that you reported to, right? So it would be your direct supervisor for paid work, perhaps your direct supervisor for volunteer would be another one you could consider. Instructors, professors, something that falls along those lines. Generally speaking, I would avoid personal references unless they ask for them. If they don't ask for them, the assumption is that you're going to, and if they don't even tell you how many, the general rule of thumb is 3 professional or academic references. And you don't have to, on a resume, we put things in reverse chronological. So the most recent first and so forth. On a reference sheet, put your best one first. It doesn't have to go in reverse chronological, right? Put your best one first, but that's a kind of a general rule of thumb in terms of who to choose.
Thanks, Chantal. I do want to add, for those who have also volunteered, your supervisor for your past volunteer experience can also be a good reference.
Yeah, I included that in there as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I have a question from E. As an international student, I am restricted to work 20 hours per week. However, I hold more than 10 years of relevant experience. How do I introduce myself to explain why I am applying to this position?
Sorry, can you ask the question again, Michelle? Can you repeat that?
Sure. As an international student, I am restricted to work 20 hours per week. However, I hold more than 10 years of relevant experience. How do I introduce myself to explain why I am applying to this position?
Okay. Well, that's up to you. So identify what it is about the company that is attractive to you, right? So why it is you want to work with them. So I think now your question pertains a little bit more to your application. So perhaps on the cover letter, I think that's where the question is coming from, or perhaps to answer the why do you want to work here question. Now, I'm not quite sure how that pertains to being able to work 20 hours per week. So I don't know if I'll address that per se, but why you're interested in working with the particular company, well, that's up to you. What is it that is drawing you to the company? I love that you're in that mindset of identifying to the employer what's prompting you to apply. But ask yourself that question: why do I want to work for this company? Right? Is it because you've had experience with them, perhaps as a client or a customer? Is it because you've heard some really great things about them? Is it because you respect the product? Is it because you've done networking and you've met with people who have or had worked with this company? These are all really important points to address to the prospective employer.
Thanks, Chantal. I'm just going to go and switch to the attendee who has their hand up. Rajan, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yeah, hey guys. So I have a question. It was regarding career day. So I made some pretty good connections, and the HR recruiters told me to go apply online, which I did. And my question was, should I go back and message the HR recruiter? And if so, like, what would my message be? Like, what would I basically say to them? Oh, I applied. Can you forward the reference? How would I kind of go along and say that?
Follow up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you had the meeting. From that meeting, they suggested you go and apply online, which you did. So what I would suggest you do is, yes, go back to the original person that you had the conversation with at Career Day. Let them know that your meeting was, it was engaging enough for you to be interested in applying for this company, right? So you could say, thank you so much for meeting me at Career Day. I really enjoyed specifically this, right? So again, you might want to reference something in particular. And as you had suggested to me, I did go and apply online. I'm really looking forward to hearing back. Thank you again for your time. So it's really just about letting them know you've listened to their suggestion, you've done it, right? You've applied. Now you go back, thank them for that, and then hopefully, they'll do some magic from their end and get you in for the interview.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. I'll move on to the next question here. It's from Alma Lopez. Could I send an email to an employer even if I couldn't have a chat with him or her on career day?
Yes, please do. Great question. Yes, I would send them an email, let them know that you were really looking forward to, but perhaps they had a really big lineup, they're a popular employer. So yes, let them know that you're interested in them. And in fact, what I might suggest you do is go to the website, identify if there's a position there you want to apply for, put together a really solid cover letter and resume, apply to it, then send the email saying, I was really looking forward to meeting with you at Career Day. You're a popular employer. I didn't get around to doing that, but I did go ahead and apply to the blah, blah, blah position on your website. And I just wanted to let you know that. Thanks again for taking part in the KPU Career Day.
Thank you. I do want to add, especially to those who have attended Career Day or who might not have attended, you will be able to still access the event page in Career Connection. You'll just need to log into your account again. And if you go into events, and I guess maybe I can do a quick share on my screen just so that you know exactly what to do. Let me just give me again. Again, just a quick share here. If you go into events from the homepage, and then from the When tab, click Past, you will be able to see the event page again, see all the employers that have attended. You have access to their, if they have posted jobs, you can see their jobs here. You can also view their profile and so forth. And of course, if you have chatted with an employer, you will be able to see all the interactions and notes that you have written when you spoken with the employer. So yeah, feel free to hop into Career Connection anytime. Okay, next question. I think this is a follow-up from Natasha's question earlier. Is there a max amount of time for how old your reference is?
Good question. So you want your references to be on your resume. And generally speaking, we suggest to go back between 10, maybe 15 years on your resume. It really does depend. I suspect many people that are here today, going back 10 years is probably more than enough. But if you need to go back for, longer than that, I would say about a max of 15 years. So more or less you want your reference to be no older than 15 years. That said, I would still recommend that you use your references within the last 5 years.
Okay, great. I think I do have the last question here from Ken. As an international student and worked in another country, can I put references, but although their English is limited?
Okay, yeah, that's another good question. Ken, yes, you can. In fact, what I would suggest that you do, because here's the thing is, a lot of human resources or recruiters or whatever, they're multilingual or from, certainly other countries and cultures. So what I would suggest on your reference list, if this reference is in another country, identify a couple of things. The language that they prefer to speak in, and let them know that they do have lower level of English, as well as the ideal time to call. So give the time zone and, give them an example. So, in order to reach them at 10 a.m. their local time, you would need to contact them at 5 p.m., from Pacific Standard Time.